Hello, my name is Mel Draper, a member of a small team working on a special collection at the National Archives called ZSPC11. I'm going to give you a short talk on the innovative steps we took which allowed us to continue working on this collection through the recent pandemic. I'll start by giving you some background on the collection and why it's at the National Archives, before moving on to show how we've changed the way in which we're building its catalogue data. The collection didn't belong to some special dignitary or well-known person, but is a personal collection of railway-related material from a wide variety of sources, including a few from influential people in the railway industry. The collection is now split between the National Railway Museum at York and the National Archives at Kew, roughly on the principle that three-dimensional artefacts are at York and paper-based materials are at Kew. As you can see from this slide, it is by no means a small collection. Mr. Hayward, the man who assembled it, was a rather ordinary individual. For most of his life he lived in Weston-super-Mare, near Bristol. He was married, although there's no record of what his wife thought about having all this collection in their home. As far as we know, they had no children, so there was no call for the collection to remain with his family when he died. He certainly promoted the collection during his lifetime, and even in the early post-war periods tried to get the establishment interested in its preservation. This was initially through contact with the Science Museum. The director even made a personal visit to inspect it during the 1947 Big Freeze, but that's a story for another time. Once the railways are nationalised, the government established the British Transport Historical Records Office, which agreed to receive it under a gift agreement. On the winding up of that office at the beginning of the 1990s, the collection transferred to the National Railway Museum and the National Archives. As far as the material at Kew is concerned, it can provide a research with an excellent starting point for an investigation of a particular aspect of railway history in Britain, or to some extent overseas. The material was carefully collected and systematically stored in large ring binders. There was a simple catalogue of the binders, but no record of the individual items within the binders. Such an item-based catalogue would make access to the collection much more useful to researchers. A project was started at the National Archives to do just this, but it quickly became clear that more help would be needed. The National Archives approached the National Railway Museum, which provided some volunteers via their Friends organisation to form our team. We worked steadily through the last decade and made good progress in cataloguing the contents of the 420 binders. We did the work on site at TNA, entering the item details directly into the ProCat computer database system. Team members use their own, or collective, specialised knowledge of railways to make the descriptions as accurate and useful to researchers as possible. That often requires more investigation of the items using external specialist reference material. All was going well, and by the end of 2019 we were over 80% of the way through to completion. But we all know what happened then. It was obvious the world was facing a serious challenge which was going to disrupt regular working. At the National Archives there are two binders we had been reluctant to start, the two holding the large collection of railway tickets. Not only are individual tickets time-consuming to identify and catalogue, but many of the tickets are valuable in their own right and are therefore accessible only under invigilation in the secure reading room at Kew. We had thought for some time that the best way to tackle these binders would be to photograph each sheet of the binders and capture the details of the ticket at our leisure, rather than spending weeks in the secure room. The looming pandemic provided the catalyst to kick this off, so we quickly got agreement to photograph the two binders, and just in the nick of time. Once the national lockdown was declared on 23rd of March, we were ready to start working from home using the photographs which had been stored on a DVD. The description of each ticket was captured into a text file on our own computers, each person working on a page of the ticket album. These text files were then uploaded into a shared storage area on the internet. Everything was going well for a couple of months, and then we realised there were a few problems we needed to sort out. As I mentioned, when we were working on site at Kew, we often worked together to clarify the description of more difficult items. We also realised, perhaps obviously really, that we ultimately needed to get the catalogue data from the text files into ProCat, once we could get it to TNA again, that was. Finally, the more we worked, the more it was clear that the complexity of the information leaves lots of possibilities for format and other errors. To illustrate the point, take a look at this example, one of the sheets of tickets and its catalogue entry. Tickets are a good example of small things that often need long descriptions. However, even a comma or a bracket in the wrong place can change the meaning. Even with shortened descriptions, it's difficult to keep within the 8,000 character limit allowed for an item entry in TNA's ProCat system. Just looking at such a dense mass of details can give you a headache, so spotting mistakes is very difficult. The solutions we came up to our problems were, first of all, to hold regular video conference meetings. These allowed us to share the images of problem tickets, hold a discussion and agree the descriptions. We also looked at alternatives for getting the data into ProCat. Retyping everything back into the National Archives computer wasn't an attractive idea. First of all, there was a likelihood limited access to the National Archives for many months. Second, it doubles up the amount of our typing for each item. And third, in retyping the data, it increases the chances to introduce more errors. The alternative, suggested by the National Archives staff, was to convert the text files into a spreadsheet which can be automatically uploaded into ProCat, so avoiding the need for retyping. But how to make sure the data in the text file was correct in the first place? That's a tough one. Clearly we needed something that we can run on our home computers which can make the required checks and prepare the spreadsheet at the same time. By the second half of 2020, we'd shown that it is feasible to do catalogue working from photographs of the tickets. There were some limited opportunities to get into the National Archives, so I went in to photograph some of the other binders. In addition, when lockdown happened, we, like everyone else at the National Archives, had to leave the catalogues half completed. It would be a shame to lose all that work, so we decided to photograph those binders that we were cataloguing at the time of lockdown and look at ways to get the data out of ProCat and onto our computers. That proved a bit more complex than it sounds, as ProCat doesn't have a way for data abstraction. The solution was to photograph the ProCat screen and then use optical character recognition to reconstruct the entries as digital text. It worked remarkably well, with only a few tweaks needed to recognize the data. In the meantime, I was working on the computer program to do the spreadsheet creation and data checking. It took a while, but the program was operational by the end of 2020. It's gone through further developments since then. It runs on a home computer and just needs the user to point it at a text file. This slide shows a sample of the display. You'll see that it detects all the dates mentioned in the item description and compares these against what the user believes is the date range. In most cases it will throw up a warning so that the user can double check the information. If you think that's trivial, think back to the list of tickets I showed earlier. There could well be 30 or more tickets, possibly each having a date. The program also makes around 24 individual format checks of the entry against the National Archives guidance, looking for things like mismatched brackets, correctly formatted names, abbreviations, measurements and currency, lack of full stops, duplicated commas, correct use of quotations, and so on. At the end, it cross-checks the data range for the entire piece, often some 80 or more items, and works out the recommended piece level date range. As well as producing the spreadsheet, it also produces a series of interlinked web page displays which show mock-ups of each item as it would appear in a National Archives discovery search. Anything which the user ought to be checking is highlighted, with some hints drawn from the National Archives guidance, in this case the formatting of a person's name. The computer produces a record file for all the potential problems it finds, effectively a hard copy of what is shown on the screen in the previous slide. The user can comment out any of these potential errors which are known to be correct. That prevents the problems being flagged up again when the program is rerun on the same text file. The ultimate aim for the user is to run the program and get an all clear message. Testing the program and the new method of working took place during last year. One interesting test was to use the Discovery Search facility to download an existing catalogue of one of over 300 binders already in the database. Actually, it was one I prepared back in 2018. The resulting spreadsheet was converted back into a simple text file and run through the program. I was surprised just how many formatting corrections it showed were needed. This was despite the original catalogue data having been manually checked by me and others while it was prepared using ProCat. Certainly proved the effectiveness of the computer-based checking program. The next test was to check that the computer-generated spreadsheet could be uploaded into Discovery without problems. To test this, we used a spreadsheet which included the optical character recognized ProCat data from a part-completed binder, subsequently completed using data from the photographs of that binder. Once the computer program declared it as all clear of formatting and date errors, the spreadsheet was uploaded into Discovery. We repeated the earlier test by searching Discovery for the binder's catalogue, downloading the entries as a spreadsheet, then running it through the program. Comparing the results with the earlier computer run showed that no errors had been introduced during the uploading process. This slide shows what part of a spreadsheet looks like. There are another 80 lines like this in this particular file. You realise that it's virtually impossible to check the formatting of such a spreadsheet manually. So comparing the data before and after uploading it into Discovery gave us confidence that we can trust the remote preparation and uploading process. Well, where are we now? We've photographed nearly half of the remaining binders. 14 of these have catalogues prepared as text files and are at various stages of final checking. Some binders still need items marking with their reference numbers before we can upload the catalogues, but 5 pieces have been uploaded into the National Archives Discovery database using the new system, and the catalogue data and binders are now available to the public. While we still need to make visits to the National Archives to photograph the remaining binders and mark up the items in them, we have shown that the rest of the work can be done from home. The computer-based system has been proved to enhance the accuracy of the data formatting and date ranges. By working from home, it's also allowed the team members to be more productive by avoiding the need to travel. It enables flexible working time and allows the team ready access to their own extensive home libraries of reference material. The end result is that the team is still together despite 2 years of lockdown restrictions, and there is a growing catalogue for this unusual collection, which is easier for researchers to use in finding items of interest. All we need to do now is to finish the remaining binders. Thank you for listening, and I hope you found the talk interesting.